Of all the strategies I've tried to break my doom-scrolling addiction, this was the dumbest. But I really have tried everything. Screen time limits, dumb phone jail, nothing stuck. And then, sort of by accident, I stumbled on a solution so absorbing, the urge to scroll just disappeared. By the end of this video, you'll know what it is, why it works, and how to make it stick, so you can invest your time in what actually matters to you. Over the past 5 years, I've used my phone to optimize every aspect of my life. Projects, workouts, memories. But somewhere along the way, what started as an intentional choice became an unintentional habit. A scroll here, a refresh there, cycling through the same few apps on autopilot. And then, like a coin you notice a second too late while vacuuming, my evening started to vanish, gone before I'd even realized what was happening. I've tried everything to rid my life of the mindless scroll, but most of the strategies I've tried have only served to show me just how weak my willpower really is. By the 1870s, the typewriter was becoming the engine of modern business communication. But there was a problem. When typists pressed certain keys too quickly in sequence, the metal arms would collide and jam. And these jams were so common they began undermining the very efficiency and reliability typewriters were supposed to bring. Most attempts to fix the issue focused on mechanical solutions, stronger springs, more disciplined technique. And then a guy called C. Latham Scholes, one of the machine's inventors, decided to approach the problem differently. Instead of pushing the hardware harder, he changed the layout of the keys, spacing out commonly paired letters to avoid collisions altogether. It wasn't necessarily faster, but it was smoother, more reliable, and far more sustainable. Instead of wrestling with the problem, he went around it. So instead of wrestling with my problem, I started to wonder, is there a way around this? Facebook was launched the year I went to college, but for years I didn't even have an account. Much the same with Twitter and Instagram. When I stopped to think about it, I realized there were two specific moments when my phone use started to become a problem. What was it about those specific points in time that made me so drawn to my phone? When I look back at my calendar, the answer was obvious. For as long as I can remember, I've spent most of my free time trying to get better at something. Sometimes those pursuits have been, they've been really serious, and on other occasions they've been completely and utterly ridiculous. Like the time I spent the whole summer trying to master the double take. I could call these things hobbies, but that doesn't quite cover it. For me, they're projects. At the end of 2019, I was performing 2 magic shows a week. In 2020, all of a sudden, there was nowhere to perform. At the end of 2023, I decided to give up competitive powerlifting. Hours of preparation every week, suddenly free. On both occasions, with nothing to pour myself into, I poured myself into the thing that was shouting loudest for my attention. But the scroll wasn't the problem. The problem was the absence of a project. I've always loved telling stories, writing them, clarifying my thoughts, sharing them. And for years I dreamed about making beautiful videos. Between Christmas and New Year 2023, with no real plan, I started a YouTube channel. By the first week in January, I'd published my first video. And since then, every month, I've tried to learn one new thing. With each new video, a single improvement, more pleasing lighting, a more intentional choice of shots. And while I wasn't even thinking about it, my screen time reduced by more than 50%. Because when I'm immersed in a project that I love, I don't even think about reaching for my phone. Time passes. I'm in flow. Requires no willpower. So if this is a solution, and yeah, I'm convinced that it is, how do you find a mini creative project that's right for you? How do you make it sustainable so that it absorbs you for the long term? One of the most useful books I read last year was Meditations for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. It's a thoughtful guide for those of us trying to navigate the finite nature of our lives and find time for the things that truly matter. One idea from the book that changed the way I think about finding meaningful projects was something Berkman calls the life task. A life task is something that life is asking you to do, but to qualify it has to satisfy two rules. Firstly, it needs to be something that stretches you, that enlarges you by going through the process of doing it. And secondly, it has to be something that you can actually do. It has to be feasible within the constraints of your life. Choosing a project that has the potential to replace doomscrolling could be as easy as asking, what's my life task right now? I know that sounds a bit woolly, but in my case, I have zero background in filmmaking. Before starting this channel, I never even owned a camera. But for some reason, I knew that my life task was to start making videos about something. And I followed that curiosity. But what if nothing comes to mind? Well, one thing you can start doing is carrying a pocket notebook. If you're anything like me, when you're idle, you daydream. Start trying to notice how you're fantasizing about spending your time. Are you thinking about writing a novel? Is it starting a podcast? Whatever it is, write it down. Then after a week, flip back through those pages and notice what is it that keeps coming up time and time again. And in those repeated fantasies, there might be a hint as to what the life task is right now. But just choosing a project is not going to throw you into that flow state that I described earlier on. If you ever tried starting something completely new before, whether it's learning to code or joining a yoga class, then you'll recognize the feeling of being so frustrated that you want to rage quit right back to your phone. Over time, I've realized that for one of my projects to have even the slightest chance of being something meaningful and absorbing, immersive, 4 things need to be in place. But before I share those, if you're still here, believe it or not, you're part of a little club that you didn't even realize that you joined. Only about 20% of people will be watching the video at this point. So if you're still here and you enjoy my videos, you might also like the newsletter that I've just started writing. Just like this channel, I share the lessons that I'm learning as a guy in his late 30s who's trying to slow down a little bit, live intentionally where possible, and find time for things that make him happy. So if you'd like to follow along with that, then I would absolutely love to have you, and you can find out more in the link in the description below. Okay, firstly, I need them to feel manageable. I try not to think in years, I think in weeks or months at most, and I treat the projects as a series of mini experiments. So if the goal was to learn a new language rather than focusing on fluency, just think, well, I'd like to be able to have a conversation about this topic. Thinking like this makes figuring out what to do, how to use your time, obvious, and the whole thing starts to feel a lot less overwhelming. But even if I treat my projects like a little experiment, I am still at risk of being derailed by the fear of judgment from others, worrying that they will think I'm foolish, or that they'll think that I think I'm way more talented than I actually am. As somebody who's put himself out there in many unconventional ways over long periods of time, I've learned that although most people don't even realize that you're being weird, they're too wrapped up in their own lives, there are enough people who do, and who, whether intentionally or not, will say things that make you feel bad, or that cause you to doubt yourself, second guess yourself. What helps me to deal with the anxiety that this creates is to find collaborators, people who share a similar goal, who are also putting themselves out there in a way that's atypical, and who can laugh with you and pick you up in moments of self-doubt. My buddy Sean illustrates these videos. I talk most days with my pal Tim, and what's great about that is that if one of us learns, we all learn. But if I ever need somebody to laugh with me at one of my failures, then I know I've got somebody who would be absolutely delighted to do that with me. And that helps me to push through those moments when I start to doubt myself. I've also found that not taking these projects or myself too seriously really helps. When I'm playful, I'm able to take risks, and those risks tend to result in the most rewarding experiences or the most important learning. About a year ago, I made a video about logical fallacies. I acted out every fallacy I knew with ridiculous examples, and watching it back now is quite embarrassing. But before I made that video, I was taking myself so seriously. If you look at some of the older videos on my channel, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And if I hadn't taken that risk of being silly on camera, then I wouldn't have learned how to relax and be myself. I think there's so many people dream about spending their time in a myriad of creative and beautiful ways, but don't get around to it for fear of maybe not being very good or worrying that they've left it too late. I understand those worries, but I think it's the wrong way of thinking about it. As far as I'm concerned, good can wait. Curiously pursuing my interests, for me at least, regardless of how ridiculous other people think they are, is the stuff that makes life worth living. And when I don't pursue those interests, as the saying goes, the devil makes work for idle hands. But having said that, there is one final lesson, which I think is maybe even the most important of all. For a project to have even the slightest hint of a chance of absorbing me in a way that makes me just forget my phone exists, I do need to improve. I don't need to be good, but I do need to get better over time. So in the video up here, I break down everything science has to say about getting better at stuff. If you're on this journey with me, then I think you'll find it useful. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll get a kick out. Thanks for watching.